Welcome back to Bonchon Warrior, where we share the wisdom and experience of those of us in the deep south of Korea. I'm Ian, your host, and today we speak with Bryan Hale. Bryan has lived in Korea for 8 years, working at many different schools and private institutes. He's currently the native teacher at Yongam High School. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature, a CELTA certificate, and he will soon earn his Master of Arts in TESOL. He has also served as the chapter president of Gwangju Jeonnam Kotisol for nearly 2 years. Bryan, it's wonderful to speak with you today.
Great to speak to you too.
Absolutely. So you have a lot of experience working down here in Korea, and I feel like it's allowed you to innovate the ways that you conduct your classes. So one thing I found very interesting was how you like to assess your students. When I was working at a high school, I would just give one-on-one interview speaking tests in order to give my students a grade. And I think that's quite a common experience for a lot of secondary native English teachers. But I've heard that you have a different approach when it comes to assessing students.
Yes. So in my first school, I had the same experience. It was a middle school, and my speaking tests, I think the first speaking test I did was about ordering pizza, and so it was a one-on-one thing with a picture of a pizza, and it was really about rote memorization, and that was a problem. That was the first problem. But the second problem was that I kind of thought all of the students understood the game. Like, the game is you only have to rote memorize this short thing, it'll only take a few minutes, and then you get an A. But actually, a lot of the students weren't really, like, they didn't get that, or no one had said that to them explicitly. And so I was surprised by how many students weren't really buying into that game. So I was so unhappy, because it was like, it's such a fake test anyway. It doesn't really test real English communication.
Right.
And a lot of them just, like, they would say to me in Korean, "I'm sorry, I don't speak English." Or like they thought it was a real, some of them seemed to think it was a real English communication test. And I had thought Korea has a lot of rote memorization and grammar translation teaching, and I thought everyone got that, including the students, but I don't think it's really like that. So at my current school, they give me a lot of freedom about how to assess, and also I think what gets called performative assessment, 수행평가, it's becoming bigger and bigger in Korean schools.
Can you define that in more layman's terms?
So Korean schools focus a lot on tests, and they have midterm and final tests each semester, which have multiple choice questions.
Yeah.
So that's like the test assessments. But a part of their score comes from everything else, like any other kind of assignment or task or project that they could be set, which is called 수행평가, performative assessments. And that's getting more weights, I think, like being taken more seriously. So, for example, my high school colleagues, they will set tasks like write a letter to somebody you admire or something, and then they score it. But they do it in a way like they'll do things like deduct marks for each grammar mistake or something. So it's better than just a multiple choice test, but I'm still not totally happy about the way they assess it. But they give me total freedom about how to do assessment. So I tend to make it half-half between students' attitude in each lesson and some kind of projects kind of thing. So you were asking about, you mentioned earlier, one-on-one interviews. So because the high school I work in now had speaking tests established as a way of doing things, but I didn't want to do that. So instead of doing that, I replaced that with just like a meeting with students, which is not part of assessment. It's just like a check-in.
A meeting.
With them. Yeah. So I have to be very clear with them that they're not being assessed on it. It's just a one-on-one meeting. So the week before tests, when they want to self-study for the test, I put 2 desks out in the hallway, and they come and sit next to me one by one, and I give them a few questions to think about, like good experiences in my class and bad experiences and anything they want to change. And they write some notes about those questions, and then we just talk about it.
I just want to clarify, when he talks about self-study, especially in middle and high school, there's oftentimes maybe a week before exams when the native teachers won't actually deliver a lesson, but rather sit and allow the students to study their materials for the test. Okay.
Sometimes I want to teach in that week, but the students say, no, we need to do self-study. So that's why I didn't want to keep the speaking test the way it was, but I kept kind of part of the pattern of that, of like meeting them one-on-one, because that's useful too. And it's just a kind of check-in, and if they have things they need to talk about the other students, then they have a chance to do that. So that's useful, but I don't want it as the test. And so instead, the kind of assessment I do is, for attitude, I keep a kind of attendance sheet, and I have their name and their face shot with space for notes for each student. So I try to keep some brief notes each week.
As a frame of reference, how many total students do you have to assess in this fashion?
I have totally less than 200 students, and in each class, maximum size about 15 normally, sometimes 18, but our class sizes are pretty good, so
that's quite substantial, actually.
Some classes it can get down to 10 students, but it's not 30, so
yeah,
it's not too bad.
I would find that a little bit difficult to have to give an attitude or attendance score. The attendance score is easy, but memorizing all the names and writing little comments. I remember when I had a co-teacher that would ask me he asked me one day, he said, Ian, can you please write one comment for every first grade student? And I was like, Sumin, there's like 230 first grade students. He's like, it only has to be like 90 words. And I'm like, you're not listening. I did my best. I wrote about 100, but anyways, so
that's why I have far less students than that. I have less than 200 totally.
Yeah.
And but that's why in the first class I take their picture holding up their name, and I promise them I'm not doing anything with it except keeping a list of names. I have to promise them it's not going on social media or anything.
Oh, for sure.
And that's how I keep track of them, because sometimes I forget their names, but if I see their face I can remember stuff about them. Yeah, so I keep notes. To be honest, I've tried a couple of times to have like a whole detailed rubric of different things, and I found it doesn't really work. It's too much stuff for them to think about, and they don't really think about it. So I try to keep it more basic, so they know that the things that matter are they should be trying to use English actively and student-to-student English, and that helps their attitude score. And then apart from that, things like being respectful and being in class on time, all of those things contribute. In the one-on-one meeting, although that's not an assessment task, I talk to them about how they're going. So if they really think that, if I'm saying, you're headed towards C, if they really think they deserve better than that, they have a chance to make the case.
So you can also, so it's not just them telling stuff about what's going on with them. You also tell them, this is what I think of your performance in my class so far. When I say performance, I just mean their attitude and their attendance and their and overall work.
If there are issues like, there are some students who are quite motivated to speak to native teachers one-on-one, but they don't see or they don't value doing student-to-student English in class. So if there's something like that, I can talk to them about it, because sometimes they will think like, I always talk to you in the corridor, I always talk to you outside class, I deserve A. And I don't agree, so I can negotiate with them about that.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how I do the attitude half of it. And for the 수행평가, the performative assessment half, I've tried various different things. This semester, I'm going to be having high school second graders will design a new app and make a poster and maybe present to the class about it.
Yeah.
So you'll do that. And this first graders, I kind of want them to get used to being very active in class. So I keep their performative assessment a bit simpler, because I don't want them to kind of like hide in, like if you give them a written task or a poster to make or something, sometimes they just kind of hide away in that and they're quiet, or they go away and do it as homework and bring it back to class and then sit quietly.
Yeah.
So in my first semester with them, I try to get them to be very active. But we do a couple of little things. For example, I'll write messages to them, like we write messages back and forth, and then I don't grade that for grammar or anything. That's just you get the full. If you do it, like if I say, let's write 3 messages back and forth, and they do 3, then they get the full.
You say messages? Do you do this on like an app on your phone? Online?
No, on paper in class. But I make a little like speech bubble app message kind of looking thing to give it the feel of messaging, so that they feel like they do it more naturally rather than treat it as an essay or something.
Sure, that's a great idea. Let's take a break. We can resume this topic in another time. But for now, I hope everyone is having a wonderful week. And this is Ian from Banchan Warrior, reminding you to live wonderfully and always bring your best.